Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are embarking on what I like to call an intellectual hero's journey. We're going to explore a deeply philosophical, really rigorous path detailing what it actually means to be a lifelong learner. Someone who doesn't just passively absorb facts, but aggressively pursues the truth. Okay, let's dive into this.
In our modern world, it is incredibly easy to just stockpile data, isn't it? We memorize facts, we doom scroll through headlines, we listen to quick summaries. But ask yourself this. Are you simply collecting facts, or are you actually seeking true wisdom? Mere data collection is just the ordinary world. It's the default. Wisdom, on the other hand, is the ultimate boon of our intellectual journey, and it requires a fundamental shift in how we interact with reality. It literally asks us to transform from passive recipients into active, daring explorers.
To really grasp this shift, think about the stark difference between just being enrolled and being a true student. Being enrolled in a school is a totally passive state. It's an administrative status where information is basically just handed to you on a platter. But the historical meaning of a student, that is a highly active one. It implies a zealous, courageous pursuit. A true student doesn't sit around waiting for a syllabus. They build their own path to uncover reality. They don't just want a good grade, they want the truth.
So why is that kind of drive so rare? Well, it actually comes down to what's happening inside our brains. Neuroscience tells us that human beings are completely hardwired to ask questions. But as we age, society, and honestly, often our standardized educational systems, unintentionally kill that natural curiosity. We get conditioned to accept the easy answers. We trade deep, rigorous curiosity for the cheap dopamine of passive entertainment. We just kind of sell for being entertained rather than being challenged.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the biological reason we avoid being challenged in the first place: cognitive dissonance. When you encounter new information that contradicts something you deeply believe, you don't just feel slightly confused. You feel actual, physical mental discomfort. This is the friction of the intellectual journey. Confronting new evidence that shatters your worldview is incredibly taxing emotionally.
So why does changing our mind literally hurt? It's because our beliefs are so deeply intertwined with our identity and our social groups. If you change a core belief, you risk alienating your community or even losing your own sense of self. It feels like a genuine, painful trial. But acknowledging this emotional attachment to ideas is step one. A true student recognizes this pain, stares it down, and walks through it anyway, armed with intellectual humility.
To navigate all that discomfort, we have to adopt the right mindset, which means cultivating healthy skepticism, not cynicism. Cynicism is just an arrogant dismissal of everything. It's a defensive wall to keep you safe. Healthy skepticism, particularly scientific skepticism, is the respectful, completely open-minded process of requiring evidence. It means you question accepted beliefs respectfully, recognizing that questioning is absolutely necessary for discovering the truth.
Which brings us to a really fascinating nuance: doubt versus disbelief. Disbelief is a closed door. Doubt, however, is an open window. Highly intelligent people frequently experience profound doubt. And why is that? Because they actually understand the vastness of what they don't know. Doubt is not the enemy of wisdom. It is the very beginning of it. It's the spark that ignites the whole engine of discovery.
Section 1. Mentors of the Truth, the Great Questioners.
Every hero's journey requires mentors, right? And for the true student, our mentors are the great questioners of history. Just trace this brilliant thread spanning human history. In ancient Greece, you had Socrates using his famous method to expose the limits of human knowledge. During the Islamic Golden Age, Al-Ghazali rigorously questioned deep philosophical assumptions. Galileo challenged the geocentric universe during the scientific revolution, and then Richard Feynman relentlessly pushed the boundaries of modern physics. Every single civilization progressed because someone, somewhere, had the courage to question accepted beliefs.
But what exactly are we questioning?
Well, mostly our own programming. Your worldview is heavily shaped by inherited factors: your family, your culture, religion, and nowadays, increasingly, media and digital algorithms. And this brilliantly illustrates that a true student realizes much of what they believe was handed to them, not actively chosen by them.
Section 2. The Student's Toolkit, Frameworks for Truth.
Once we realize we're just swimming in a sea of inherited assumptions, we need a way out. We need practical tools to break free from the illusion of certainty so we can actually evaluate reality. A true student operates using these essential mental models. First up, first principles thinking. This means stripping a problem down to its absolute most basic, undeniable truths and building up from there. Then you've got Bayesian thinking, which involves constantly updating your beliefs the second new evidence arrives.
Systems thinking looks at the interconnected whole, not just isolated little parts. And finally, probabilistic reasoning reminds us that very few things in life are absolute. We operate in probabilities, not certainties.
This entire pursuit requires a profound level of Cartesian doubt. As the philosopher René Descartes famously noted, finding absolute truth requires you to doubt at least once in your life absolutely everything. You literally have to be willing to strip away every single assumption you hold dear. This is exactly why experts and true scholars think so differently than the rest of us. They don't cling to what they want to be true, they embrace uncertainty, actively trying to disprove their own hypotheses, just to see what survives the fire of logic.
And as you gather those rare truths that actually survive that fire, you don't just shove them into isolated little boxes in your brain. You build a network of ideas. It's like a giant puzzle. True learning is totally interdisciplinary. It's about weaving a web that beautifully connects philosophy, psychology, history, mathematics, and science all together. When you can connect a psychological concept to a historical event and a biological reality, you aren't just memorizing anymore. You are building profound, multidimensional wisdom. Now, building that intricate network requires some really rigorous input. So here are the active reading strategies of a true student. You don't just skim summaries or take someone else's opinions as fact. You go straight to the original texts. You annotate. You are constantly asking questions of the author. You identify their underlying assumptions, actively hunt for their logical fallacies, and ruthlessly evaluate their evidence. Basically, you're engaging in an intense two-way conversation with the material, not just passively absorbing it like a sponge. Let's move to and see how this builds into a lifelong roadmap. The journey always starts with the foundations, mastering basic logic and critical thinking. Then, as an intermediate learner, you start applying the scientific method and diving deep into history and psychology. And as you get super advanced, you tackle epistemology, which is literally the study of knowledge itself, along with ethics and cognitive science. It is a highly structured, lifelong climb. But let's be honest, many people stumble on this climb. Why do students fail? Usually because they want certainty way too quickly, or because confirmation bias drives them to only seek out information that validates what they already believe, or they fear that social and emotional pain of changing their minds that we talked about earlier. And crucially, because they confuse having a lot of information with actually having deep understanding. True wisdom, for sure, requires immense patience. So, how do we prevent that failure? Well, we turn this whole philosophy into a lived, rigorous daily practice. A true student's routine has to include dedicated reading and observation, but it absolutely cannot stop there. That has to be followed by deep reflection and contemplation, literally just giving your brain time to process. Then, you've got to discuss these ideas with others to stress test them. And finally, the absolute hardest step, actively revising your beliefs based on what you've just learned. Listen, if you take only one habit away from this entire explainer, let it be this. 1. Commit to asking exactly one meaningful, deeply considered question every single day. Don't just immediately Google the answer. Sit with the question. Write it down. Let it bother you a little bit. This single habit is the absolute heartbeat of scientific curiosity and lifelong learning. Section 3. The True Student's Oath, a manifesto for learning. As we reach the culmination of our intellectual journey here, we realize that becoming a true student is not just about what you know, it is completely about who you become. Becoming a true student is about developing intellectual character. It takes humility to admit you are wrong, courage to face the unknown, complete honesty with yourself, open-mindedness to new evidence, and compassion for others who are out there on their own journeys. So, the crucial point is developing these virtues ultimately matters far more than raw intelligence. Intelligence without these virtues just leads to arrogance, but with them it leads to genuine wisdom. Which leaves us with this final, defining question. The comfort of thinking you know everything is an incredibly powerful illusion, but it is just an illusion. Will you drop your defenses, embrace the discomfort of doubt, and trade the illusion of certainty for the lifelong, courageous pursuit of truth? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning.